Hey guys, so great to be back with you. This week we're going to be looking at Moses. Moses and Aaron set off for Egypt to be used by God to free his people from the Egyptians. So let's start by jumping straight into the story, which is found in Exodus chapter 4 to 13. So you may prefer to use one of the animated videos included in the description and guide, or use a story version.
God speaks to Moses, and Moses uses Aaron as his mouthpiece. God performs a mighty work through Moses and Aaron to free his people. We see how God inflicts 10 plagues on the Egyptians until Pharaoh finally agrees to let the Israelites go.
After each plague, Pharaoh gets the chance to release them, but each time he refuses. Sometimes he says he will in order to get Moses to stop the plague, but he quickly goes back on his word and refuses to let them go.
In the Bible, we read that Pharaoh's heart was hardened, so he would not let God's people go. Now, rescuing his people from the harsh treatment of the Egyptians was actually only step one in God's plan. This was going to be the start of an amazing adventure for the Lord's people.
He was going to bring them into the promised land, the great land that he promised them when he spoke to Abraham, his son Isaac, his son Jacob, who was Joseph's father. And remember, Moses comes from the family of Levi, one of Joseph's brothers.
The Bible is one big story, one big thread of God's rescue of humankind, which is why we keep tracing it back, because while they are all great stories by themselves, slotted together, they tell us more about the great rescue plan that God has for us.
Part of this plan also included how God was going to make a place among them for his presence to dwell, to lead and guide them.
He's going to give them instructions on how to live the best life. Instructions that still guide us and our country now, today. And he's going to do many more incredible things through them.
Before they go on this incredible adventure, God uses this escape from hardship from the Egyptians to show them his great strength, his great power, might and commitment to them, so that they can have confidence in him and trust him through all that he is going to do in and through them in the months and years to come.
God creates out of this escape a significant moment that will be remembered forever, a moment that his people can look back on and be reminded of his mighty works and great faithfulness to them.
Exodus 10 verse 1 to 2 says, "So that I may perform these signs of mine among them, so that you may tell your children and grandchildren, and that you may know that I am the Lord." But he also creates a moment of hope, a moment to look forward to that points to an even greater rescue, the rescue that Jesus brought us when he came to earth, lived among us, taught us, explained his word to us, came as the fulfillment of the word, and died and rose again to free us from death and sin that so easily trap and enslave us.
After 9 plagues, it is only on the 10th that Pharaoh finally agrees, once and for all, to set the people free and let them go. During this plague, God takes every firstborn son and animal from the Egyptians, but passes by every Israelite house that has been marked with the sign of the blood of the Lamb over the doorframe of their houses.
This event became known as the Lord's Passover. The Lord instructed the Israelites each year to celebrate a meal together to remember the time that he freed them from the Egyptians and passed over their households and protected them from harm through the blood of the Lamb.
This meal was celebrated each year by the Lord's people, and they would remember his great deliverance, the great rescue he performed to save them from the Egyptians. Throughout the Old Testament, this event is constantly referred to remind God's people of his continued faithfulness to them. It would have been like Christmas and Easter is for us. Each year we celebrate those two events and remember when Jesus came to earth and died on a cross and rose again to rescue us from death and from being enslaved to sin.
Jesus is referred to in the Bible as the Passover Lamb. He celebrates this festival just before he goes to the cross and fulfills its true meaning. In 1 Corinthians 5 verse 7 to 8 it says, "For Christ our Passover Lamb has been sacrificed."
In what is known as the Last Supper in the New Testament, the last meal that Jesus shares with his disciples before he goes to the cross, they were actually celebrating the Passover meal together, but Jesus adds new meaning to it.
He takes the bread and gives it to them, saying, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." He then takes the cup and giving it to them to drink says, "This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for the forgiveness of sins."
You may have seen these words or heard them spoken before during communion. When we take communion in church, we remember what Jesus has done for us, how he has rescued us. Jesus tells us to keep doing this, to remember what he has done for us until he comes again.
Jesus, through dying on the cross and raising back to life, made a way for us to be rescued from death with the hope of heaven forever. He frees us from the things that enslave us, such as what people think about us or times when we mess up.
In our lives, God often performs signs and wonders, big or small, to act as snapshots or reminder points, to remind us of the goodness, kindness and faithfulness that he has shown us. There are key moments in our lives that we can look back on and remember how God was with us and how he made a way for us.
For example, some of these moments for me would be when I first chose to follow Jesus, when I remember he answered a prayer about a tricky time I was having in school, how he blessed me with some amazing friends, the first time I went on a Christian camp and encountered God in a fresh way and was really touched by him, when I went on a church weekend away and learned something new about God.
It is so good to look back and remember God's faithfulness to us, and it also offers hope as we look forward, knowing that just as he was faithful to us then, he will be faithful to us now and into the future as we put our trust in him. So why don't you pause and grab a piece of paper and a pen and draw a timeline of your life so far and mark on it some key moments that are significant to you in your walk with God.